Welcome to Women of Impact in Anesthesiology. I'd like to introduce today Dr. Alice Coombs, Professor and Chair of the Department of Anesthesiology at Virginia Commonwealth University. Thank you for joining me today. For those of us who may not know you very well, can you please give me a brief summary about yourself?
Thank you. Well, I came into the field of anesthesiology in an indirect way, but I'm here. I was initially interested in internal medicine. I've always been interested in anesthesia, but when I first tried to pursue anesthesia in medical school at UCLA, my advisor told me that the field of anesthesia was for people who couldn't get into other residencies and were from outside the United States. They trained outside the United States. So he said it was a quote unquote low esteemed profession. That was back in the late 70s. And I even wanted to go into anesthesia back then, so much so that I did a preceptorship in anesthesiology. But because of the discouragement, I actually went into internal medicine, which I liked as well. And I matched at Mass General Hospital in internal medicine. And I loved internal medicine. But after completing internal medicine, I really still wanted to go into anesthesia. And I applied for the anesthesia residency after being in private practice for a year and a few months, and went back into residency at Mass General in anesthesiology, after which I absolutely loved anesthesia. And I did a critical care medicine fellowship at Mass General as well. And then I followed with a cardiothoracic anesthesia fellowship at Tufts University, where I stayed on staff, and I was one of the directors of the surgical intensive care unit. My background is from Compton, California. I grew up in an area that was pretty rough. I went to UCLA, and I wanted to be a doctor because I saw healthcare disparities in my neighborhood, and I wanted to make a difference in people's outcomes.
Thank you for your story. It's really unique and a great inspiration for all of us. You are one of the few people of color to achieve a successful career in anesthesia in terms of leadership. Why do you think you've been so successful?
I'm doing what I like to do in terms of caring for patients. I do what I like to do in terms of mentoring individuals. I do what I enjoy doing, and I really do bask in moving people to a better place. I love that part. I love the people science of medicine. I love people science when it comes to patients. I love the whole idea of leadership to move cohorts of people. It's not always easy. And for me to see when it's a difficult road ahead is to think differently. And that's what I have to do. And I have to convince myself. And there are small victories that occur that really spur you on to even better works. So I think that joy that I have with moving people into a better position is really important. And that serves as a stimulus for me to work harder and to do the most good. And sometimes doing the most good is not doing good for everyone, but doing the most good that I can do.
What do you think we can do as an anesthesia community to foster inclusion of people of different races, ethnicities, and culture into leadership positions?
So I think it's really important, if we are talking about inclusion, that we include the people who are making the decisions. So for instance, we have a majority of academic centers. I know that some people talk about it and it's more window dressing, but to actually have activities engaged around it. In other words, if I talk about true commitment to inclusion, it means that the chairs of departments of anesthesia would actually do an activity that they thought of within the department. So for instance, it could be that they've actually looked at their department and they've seen some issues of cultural barriers. They actually address those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It takes work.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who is willing to work at it, I think they're going to have a better result. John Butterworth always says something that is really important. He says, if you look for qualified people, you will have diversity in your department.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And his department at VCU is probably one of the most diverse departments you will ever see.
Mm-hmm.
So I would challenge other chairs to take on what he basically talked about, which is what criteria are you considering when you're actually hiring people?
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. And the other issue is for better retention and better inclusion too, is to hire in cohorts. If you hire in cohorts, the Harvard Business Review actually has talked about this. If you're going to hire in cohorts. If you're going to hire women, hire 3 women at one time. You know, if you're going to hire men, hire 2 men, 3 men at one time. If you're going to hire someone who is passionate about pediatrics, hire 3 pediatrics anesthesiologists at one time. So cohort hiring actually increases the retention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of makes sense because you have a group of people with similar
Mm-hmm.
Ideas. What advice can you give to people who are experiencing bias?
So I honestly have experienced not just bias, but actual racism.
Mm-hmm.
And you know it, not because it's like pornography, when people say, you know it when you see it, you know it when you feel it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know it because it's directed, it's deliberate, it is intentional. I think it's painful, but there's a certain part of me, after being in academic medicine for this stint and being in private practice, one thing I've learned is that when it happens, I must be getting close to being right where I should be. I know that for a fact that where there is no struggle, there's no progress, as Frederick Douglass says. Where there is no struggle, there's no progress. Frederick Douglass. I know that when there's struggle, it actually gets people who may be biased, who may be actually racist to another level. And I'm okay being the instrument that God uses. I'm okay with that. And I've challenged myself to be the person that actually can sit down and have tea with someone who I think actually had some kind of adverse encounter. I'm okay with that. It does not stop me from being the person who I want to be. And so I think that part of my encouragement to other anesthesiologists, whether you're Black, white, gay, trans, no matter who you are, when you get that opposition, when you get that prejudice behavior, I want you to know that you're in the right place to provoke people to do that, because you are the very person that can stand up and say, I want you to learn from me. I want you to learn that I am good at what I do. And there's no environmental stimulus that's negative that's going to impact that. And I'm here to stay. So be encouraged. And I look historically at all the people who've struggled, and I look at some of the things that they've gone through. They needed to have radical transparency where they could see exactly what was happening and then move on.
Mhm.
That's not to say it doesn't hurt.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness, it does.
Mhm.
But to understand that you are in the right place at the right time and you're doing good by your patients, you're doing good to the community. Do not be discouraged, be encouraged.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. It's an important for people to understand what it feels to have racism, evoked on them, but also how to stand up and for younger people to know how to deal with it. Because sometimes you don't know what to do. So thank you. On a more personal note, as an accomplished leader in the field of anesthesia, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would if I were writing a letter to my younger self, I would tell my younger self not to pass up opportunities, to consider the time of my life that I'm in, and to prioritize the things that I wanted to do for each stage, and understand that to everything there is a season. I need to understand that to every time, every season, there's a time, and I needed to really consider what season of my life I'm in. And I do enjoy giving back, and it's just it's in my DNA. It's in my DNA. I enjoy giving back.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. I appreciate all your wisdom, and thanks for sharing.